about, what are the stories that create our world, and how are they changing, and what are the new stories going to be? Because the institutions and the habits of thought, including money, that we live in are based on the old stories that define the world. And I bet I should tell you what these are, so that it's not too abstract. Every culture has a story of the people. Well, almost every culture has a story of the people that says, where are we from? What is a human being? What's the purpose of human life? Who am I? What is my role? What is our role? What is my role? What is the role of a 44-year-old male? What is the role of a grandfather? What is the role of a little girl? What is the role of a human being in relation to land, in relation to water, in relation to other people? What is the purpose of life? And just basically, who are we? Who am I? Who are we as a people? These are the deepest questions or some of the deepest questions that a human being can ask. And every culture has a slightly different answer. Western civilization, and to some extent Eastern civilization, and to some extent anything that calls itself a civilization, or that we would call a civilization, has something in common, something that's grown over thousands of years. The story of the people that has created our world today. And it's coming to an end. That story of the people has two parts. One is the story of the self, and the other is the story of the world. The story of the self says, what is it to exist? What is it to be? And it says, well, you're a separate being, a separate self, in a universe that's outside of yourself, and here's a bunch of other separate selves. Biology says it's the phenotype that's generated by the selfish genes that seek to maximize their reproductive self-interest. Religion says it's the fleshly envelope for the separate soul, a spirit encased in flesh. Psychology says that it's a mind, or philosophy, like Descartes says, it's this consciousness that's really separate from matter. And a lot of people still, say, there's matter, then there's consciousness, spirit and flesh, soul and body, two separate parts. Economics, you're again a rational actor. So you're this kind of bubble of psychology. And there's a bunch of other bubbles of psychology, and we're all separate, which means a couple things. It means, one, that we're fundamentally in competition with each other, because more for me in this objective universe out there is less for you. So to be nice, and you're driven to maximize your self-interest by biology, by your genes. This is part of the story. So basically it says that you're bad, and that in order to counteract this badness, we have to have civilization, we have to have spiritual training, we have to have willpower, we have to have self-restraint, we have to overcome the flesh, overcome the body, overcome the instincts, overcome pleasure, overcome desire in order to be good, because that's the nature of the separate self. And it's also implied in this, in having a soul separate from body. What's the good part? Soul. What's the bad part? Body. What's the good vibrations? High. What are the bad vibrations? Low. Who invented this whole idea of high vibrations are good and low vibrations are bad? It's all part of this paradigm of separation. And so the story of the people is similar. It's that humans are separate from nature, and that our destiny is to conquer and transcend nature. And we do that through science and technology, and we've conquered many diseases, and we're working on the rest. Scientists are working on the rest, and we've transcended many natural limits, and soon we will transcend them all and have synthetic food and colonies in space and onward and upward, this whole paradigm. And it's already wearing thin. But when I was a kid, we all believed in it totally. Yeah, of course there's going to be space colonies by the year 2000. That's the future. Don't you believe in the future? But now, the future, actually when I was a kid in the 70s, it was 1990. Like futuristic TV shows like 1990 had these high-tech space colonies and stuff. And the future's been running behind schedule for so long now that we don't really believe in it anymore. Plus, all of the wonders that were supposed to happen through our conquest of nature have not manifested. In fact, things are getting worse and worse. Things are getting out of control, and we can't hide that fact anymore from ourselves. We can't pretend that we're on the right track. So on an intellectual level, these stories are falling apart. And on a social level, they're falling apart too, because the institutions that are built on them don't work anymore. The institution of healthcare, for example, while the story was strong, when the story was young, the healthcare system seemed to be having great successes. Lifespan went up by a quarter century in the first half of the 20th century. Lifespan went up by 25, 26 years. Since then, it's gone up by like 9 years. And now it's actually starting to decline. The first half of the 20th century we conquered, supposedly, or it seemed as if we had conquered all of the plagues and epidemics and mass killers, cholera, smallpox, polio, all of these diseases were conquered one by one. And so they were saying, by the year 2000, there will be no more disease. We'll have lifespans of 200 years. Like scientists were saying that. And now it's obvious that we haven't conquered disease. In fact, all these new diseases are coming that science has no answer for. So we're losing faith. We're losing faith in our stories. And what happens when you lose faith in the stories? Then the symbols have no power anymore. When the voodoo culture is infiltrated enough by Western schooling, by Western religion, by science, and people lose their belief in it, then the magic doesn't work anymore. I heard an anecdote from some hunter-gatherers in the Amazon. They said, in the old days, our rituals were more powerful. They said, we could manifest seedlings in our hand and plant them in the, just manifest them through these rituals. And we could make the rain come, and we could do all these amazing things, which weren't even amazing. Well, I'm elaborating on the story a little bit. But they said we can manifest seedlings in our hand, and now it's very rare to manifest even a seed. Our rituals have become less powerful. When the rituals stop working, it means that the story of the people is falling apart. It's an existential crisis for that society. And we are facing a crisis like that right now, when the politicians say, they try to speak into existence what will come to pass, but we don't believe them anymore. Lies have become so routine from politicians and from the powers that be that we discount everything they say. And we say, well, what is they really trying to say? What's the code in here? The words mean almost nothing. And that's another symptom of stories that are falling apart. Another symptom is that when a story falls apart, it begins to explore these absurd extremes. Like when an animal's dying, it'll go through these death throes, which is an exaggerated semblance of life. And so now we have stories